What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to the bench for a brand new episode here on Rivals and Adversaries. Today we're going to spin back into our wonderful A6M3 Model 32 and we're going to go ahead and jump into decals. Now last time I overcoated everything with that beautiful amber gray color by AK Real Colors. Absolutely love that paint. I added some blue black there around the cowling and for the inner surface of the canopy, covered it with Future, and today we are ready to start decaling. Now the decals look pretty decent and I am excited to go ahead and try them out because these are the type of decals that you can actually remove the carrier film right off the top of the decal. I don't know how that works, but Joe said it's not too hard, it's just a little bit tedious, so I have that to look forward to. We're going to go ahead and use our exact same decal method as we always do, a little microsol, a little microset, some warm water, of course for the decal, some Q-tips to blot off the water, and hoping this goes really well. However, before we can get on those main decals, we have to go ahead and also tackle the stencils. So let's go ahead and jump into our very first time lapse, guys. We're just going to focus on the stencils, the decals, and all that good stuff right there. And I also want to apply the yellow bands around the leading edges of the wings. Let's go ahead and get this started, guys. Let's see what we can do. Start doing some decals. All right, everybody, so we are back, and that actually turned out to be a pretty decent little decaling process. These settled down really well, so I'm very pleased to say we are fully decaled now. We have our stencils on there, and I'm overcoating all the little decals with some microsol just to make sure that they're not going to go anywhere. But that, of course, means I have to go and let this dry before I can come back. Right now it's nighttime, so tomorrow morning I'll come back out, and we'll go ahead and tackle that decal film removal. So let's go ahead and put a quick pause in here and we'll be right back. And we are back. It's actually the next morning and we're going to go ahead and start with the rear tail decal. and we're going to attempt to remove the carrier film. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and use an X-Acto knife, though you could basically use anything where you can go ahead and get it under that decal film and just slowly work that carrier film. And as you see, it does come off in small little sheets. So we're going to have to be very careful here to go ahead and pick up each of those different sheets and pull it clean off the decal. So I've done 1/2 of the tail coat, and I don't know if you can really tell, but it does give it a bit of a matte finish. Doesn't look like a typical decal. So now we have to go ahead and do that to basically all the decals here on the model, except I'm not going to go ahead and tackle the very tiny little stencils. I'm just going to focus on the very large markings like the rising sun, any tail codes, and of course the band around the back of the fuselage. So let's go ahead and try this large underwing surface decal right here. Again, with my X-Acto knife, I'm just going to go ahead and go right around the very top of this and just pick up that decal film just ever so slightly. Then I can grab a toothpick, tweezers, Q-tip, whatever I want to go ahead and do, and just start peeling that back. In this case, we're going to use some tweezers, and I'm just going to very slowly, with very minimal pressure, just start working that carrier film clean up off that decal. And as you can see, it actually does come off. I've never done anything like this before, but it actually is pretty easy. Just a little bit, like Joe said, tedious. It's a very good word for it. But let's go ahead and jump into a time lapse. I won't make you sit there and watch me pull off all the carrier film in real time. We're going to go ahead and time lapse it. So let's jump back on in there. We're going to finish off the carrier film removal. Then I want to go ahead and apply a gloss coat to protect the decals, because obviously I'm pulling off the decals protective layer, so they would be, I would assume, far more susceptible to weathering and washes. So I'm going to go ahead and overcoat it just to protect the finish. And then we're going to go ahead and start on that green kind of marble effects that we have in the instructions. Very thin paint, very low air pressure, and we're going to work slow and steady through different sections of the top coat there on the aircraft. Once that is all done, we can then re-gloss coat it again, just go ahead and seal that all in, and we can begin our weathering process. Ooh, lots to do here, guys. Let's jump on in there. Let's finish off this project. Let's get on with it and see what we can do. All right, so we are back, and as you have seen, we have removed all the carrier film. We gloss coated everything. We came back, we airbrushed that green squiggle pattern camo, and we gloss coated that as well. We've got the yellow bands painted on there, and it's actually looking pretty sharp, looking very much like a 0. So now we're going to move over to weathering, and I'm going to go ahead and do something very simple with this. I'm just going to use some AK panel liners and some different MIG washes as a sludge wash. And we're going to go over the entire aircraft. That should help to kind of tint different colors here and there and give it a little bit of dirt and grime. So that's going to be good enough. I was doing a bit of reading too, and I read that that the Zero in the early stage of the war, it was kept pretty meticulous, even if it was operating off of some rougher airfields. And this is actually one of the earlier Zeros, so I'm going to go ahead and pull back a little bit on the weathering. I'm not going to do nearly as much weathering here as I did on the Corsair, but I still am going to want to do a little bit of staining, chipping, all that good stuff, just not to the same extent. But let's go ahead and roll into that final time lapse here, guys. I want to work with washes. I want to get all the detail parts glued in there, get the final assembly done, and we'll be back and I'll show you guys what we come up with. All right, let's keep it going, guys. We're almost there. Let's wrap up this Zero. All right, everybody, we are back. And after 6 long weeks here on the bench, we have finally finished off our Edward Zero, and I'm really happy with how this has turned out. Yeah, the kit had a couple of foibles here and there, but overall, the detail is amazing. The kit is absolutely beautiful. So let me go ahead and show you what we came up with, and here it is. This is the Edward 1/48 scale A6M3 Model 32 from the Samurai Boxing, the dual combo, and this was such a fun build. I really enjoyed most of the parts and pieces, so I do say that there are quite a few photo etch parts I did not use because, well, you're not going to see them and they're so finicky. I really don't like photo etch as much as I probably should, but we have this all well and good, buttoned up, painted. We've got a great looking set of details in here. Let me zoom in and I'll show you what we got going on. So you can see we did do that nice squiggle pattern of camo. That was not easy to do. It was very time consuming, but I think it turned out as close as I can get it to what we have in the pictures. So yeah, pretty pleased about that. I was very careful not to overspray too much on the actual markings, so I went around the different national markings, of course, and around the band. I tried to be really controlled, but also random as well. The decals, I will say, actually performed really, really well. We did pull that carrier film off of there, so I'm happy that I didn't rip any decals. Had a little bit of a foible there with the stripe around the fuselage, but nothing I really couldn't handle. The yellow I painted on, and I probably should have painted on the red stripe as well, but I wanted it to match the different reds here on the model, so I left it alone and tried out the decals. I really, really enjoy how this turned out. I'm not sure if it's my best model ever, but I had a blast with this particular project. Zooming in a little bit more for you here, you can check out the cockpit. That was by far my favorite part of this entire model. I really enjoyed this aspect of this kit. I will say, even though I'm not a huge fan of photo etch, what we got here in the kit was absolutely beautiful. Everything fit right into place. The coloring was actually pretty close. I was worried it wouldn't be, but it actually was fairly spot on. And we added in a couple of extra deep green panels here and there to give a little bit more life, interest, and kind of a splash of color. So that was actually the best time I had here on the model. Beautiful detail, beautiful fit. Really happy the way that turned out. Now again, going back to all of the different color schemes and all this, I chose this one because I've always wanted to try to do kind of this like squiggle pattern camo. And I really was very, very careful with trying to get in there and not make a mess of it, because you got to run really thin paint, and I wanted to run a low PSI so I wouldn't splatter everywhere. And I used this Gunzy Mr. Color right here, and that is probably a really nice paint to use for this, because I was able to thin that down and it always works well through my airbrush. Now speaking of my airbrush, I have this little thumb screw on the back here. Something that most airbrushes have, and it is actually a limiter for how far you can pull back on that needle. So as you can see, I can pull the trigger down and I can thread this in, and it actually pushes that front trigger so it doesn't let you go back as far, so it gives you a little bit of an artificial stop. I actually went ahead and set this at a nice decent depth so I'd have a little bit of control, but I wouldn't go too far and just blast and spider paint all over the surface. I was very patient. Even so, there's a couple of areas that got a little bit too much paint or a little darker than others, but I really wanted to maintain that control around all the markings and to give it that kind of overall green color, but having that amber gray kind of show through in different locations. And I didn't want to airbrush over, of course, what I painted, like the cowling or the yellow stripes. One of the things I will say was a bit of a letdown with this kit is actually the drop tank. It's all raised panel lines, which maybe that's done on purpose, I don't really know. You notice with the amber gray, I kept it a little bit lighter on the cloth portions of the aircraft. Metal here on the wing a little darker, and then on the cloth it's a little lighter. Same thing on the top, but of course that was covered up by the green squiggle pattern camo, so you really can't see the full effect of that. But honestly, very, very easy to do. I also came back in and did a little bit of actual paint chipping using a fine brush and a little bit of chrome silver. Just kind of picking out a couple panels here and there. Again, I didn't want to go too dirty with it or chip it up too much because that wasn't the goal. Zeros were kept fairly clean in the early parts of the war. Just a little bit here and there adds a bit of life and character to it, and I'm pretty pleased with what we came up with. But that is it for us today, guys. We are all finished up with Season 2 of Rivals and Adversaries. Phase 1, of course, was the F4U-1 Birdcage Corsair, an absolutely fantastic model to build. And then, of course, Phase 2 was its rival here in the A6M3 Model 32 by Edward. You can just look and tell the differences in these different aircraft. We've got that big beefy Corsair and that small, nimble, agile Zero. It's a very interesting matchup. I had a blast with both of these kits. I did prefer the Tamiya Corsair a little bit more than the Zero, but I think that's because I had a bit more license that I could create and scratch build there with the Corsair, and I didn't have any photo etch. And photo etch is not necessarily a big selling point for me. I just don't like fiddling with it so much. And there's a ton of photo etch in the Zero kit. That's why I'm such a fan of the weekend edition kits here, because you don't have to fool with the photo etch. You can just build the kit as is, which absolutely has amazing details. So keep that in mind if you're looking at a Zero. They did just release the weekend edition kit of this particular build. But that is it for us today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here on season number 2 of Rivals and Adversaries. I really had a blast with this particular matchup. I think we're going to take a little bit of a break though. Go ahead and pull back a bit, take a bit of a breather. I know Joe is also going to be finishing up his Corsair, and I think he's going to also take a bit of a breather, kind of regain that mojo, and then hopefully we'll be back and we'll go ahead and try another build. So until then, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to go check out Joe's channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give him a like, give him a thumbs up, leave a comment. He's got some awesome looking models. His Corsair is beautiful. And we'll see you back here on the next episode of Ben Builds. Until then, you know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool. And we'll see you back here on the next episode of Ben Builds for more modeling adventures. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.